Let the doors be open. Déclaration de députés, statements by members. The Honourable Member for Newmarket, Aurora.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last Wednesday, our community celebrated the 100th birthday of George Marco, a Second World War veteran and a community hero. At the start of the pandemic, George vowed to walk 100 kilometers around his retirement home in Newmarket to raise $100,000 for medical research before his 100th birthday. A year later, George has raised over $160,000 and walked more than 150 kilometers. And at 100 years young, he says he will continue to walk to raise funds to help fight coronavirus. May George's kindness motivate all of us to help those in need, and may his determination to give back to his community inspire all of us today and into the future. On behalf of Newmarket Aurora, happy birthday, George, and thank you for your service.
The Honourable Member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Mr. Speaker, the Canada-U.S. border agreement includes an exemption for Campobello. Residents of this New Brunswick island must drive through the state of Maine to re-enter Canada for essential reasons. On April 9th, Ottawa decided that islanders must comply with its new registry, Arrive Can, each time they drive on and off the island or risk fines. This means a responsible minister wants to know whenever islanders go to and from work, buy groceries or fuel, go see a doctor, or comply with child custody arrangements. Yet New Brunswick already collects this health and travel data. Ottawa's work is redundant. Campobello should be exempt from Arrive Can, given their unique situation. Canada is in a troubling third wave because of Ottawa's incompetence securing vaccines. From April 4th to 16th, 120 international flights with COVID-positive passengers arrived in Canada. Leave Campobello alone. The provincial government has it covered. Ottawa should instead do its job where it will be effective.
Member for Etobicoke North.
In Canada from COVID-19 hotspots.
Mr. Speaker, Muslims in Etobicoke North and across Canada are celebrating the holy month of Ramadan. It is a month-long religious journey, a time of spiritual reflection, an opportunity to show gratitude for the many blessings we share through fasting, prayer, and charity. While fasting during the daytime, many Muslim Canadians continue to be on the front lines of our fight against COVID-19. During these unprecedented times, we remember the many contributions Muslim communities have made to our country since the pandemic began, as they have done for many generations. I would like to especially recognize President Omar Farouk of the International Muslims Organization that provided food weekly to the community, and Osman Ali of the Somali Canadian Association of Etobicoke for providing groceries to families. As we continue to follow public health guidelines to keep our communities safe, I wish all celebrating a blessed, peaceful Ramadan.
L'Honorable.
The Honourable Member for Montarville. Mr. Speaker, rail safety is something that the people of Saint-Basile-le-Grand, Saint-Bruno de Montarville, and Saint-Hubert are very concerned about. And they're not the only ones after the avoidable tragedy of Lac Mégantic that I witnessed as the Minister of Public Safety in Quebec at the time. My predecessor and the current mayor of Saint-Basile had managed to limit the number of wagons going through the riding to 100. But since then, that number has increased. Sometimes it goes up to 200 train cars. There have been a lot of wagons going through that cause serious vibrations and also pose a safety risk. They may also be transporting hazardous materials. And the town of Saint-Basile-le-Grand is literally cut in two, which can limit the ability of emergency services to get from one end of the town to the other. We need to meet these legitimate concerns. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'Honorable.
The Honourable Member for Bourassa. Mr. Speaker, today I'd like to highlight the involvement of religious leaders in the fight against COVID-19 in Montreal North in my riding of Bourassa. About 30 leaders, including pastors, imams, priests, and a Buddhist monk, took part in a virtual meeting that I had the honor of organizing. These leaders were accompanied by specialists such as the Director of Public Health of Montreal, Senator Meiji, a sociologist, and medical associations from the Haitian community, as well as leaders of the North Island University Health Network. In order to foster positive attitudes toward vaccination in religious circles, they proposed a communication campaign to fight against false beliefs and misinformation about vaccines. Many said that they would be happy to have the health network set up temporary vaccination sites in their places of worship. I want to recognize the dedication and commitment of these religious leaders who participated in the meeting. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Oshawa.
Mr. Speaker, improving access to mental health care is essential for all Canadians, now more than ever, and especially for our youth. Right behind me is Simcoe Street United Church, home of the Backdoor Mission. Since COVID, those seeking help are younger than ever, as young as 15 years old, and almost all are struggling with mental health issues. Clarence Kiesman, head of the Refuge Youth Outreach Center, said that this week they lost another of their beloved youth. That brings the total deaths to 5 since last fall. 5, Mr. Speaker. My own daughter, Grace, like too many young women, has seen the prolonged COVID shutdowns play havoc on her mental and physical health, jeopardizing her education and healthy future. She asks, for young people, is the cure worse than the disease? I'm very thankful to Oshawa organizations working every day to help these young people, but they can't do it alone. Access to mental health care must be a priority. Let's set aside the politics of division and recognize our common humanity. Let's stand together and improve access to mental health care for all Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Ottawa South.
Mr. Speaker, it's a real privilege for me to thank essential workers in my riding and across Canada. Essential workers bravely go to work every day in these very challenging times. Thank you to our armed forces, first responders, daycare workers, teachers and school staff, grocery store clerks, pharmacists and their staff, automotive technicians, truckers, municipal workers, bus drivers, waste collection employees, taxi and ride-share drivers, pilots, warehouse workers, delivery drivers, veterinarians, farm workers, food processing plant workers, security guards, pharmaceutical manufacturing workers, restaurant employees preparing takeout, HVAC technicians, plumbers, electricians, roofers, contractors, and so many more. We will never forget the sacrifices that all of our essential workers are making, and I thank them on behalf of all of our neighbours. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During this National Volunteer Week, I want to take this opportunity to thank the thousands of Canadians who give generously of their time and energy to help their community and their fellow citizens. I especially want to mention the volunteers of Châteauguay-Lacolle and our volunteer centres in Châteauguay, Napierville, and Saint-Rémy. Or I could also mention the organizations Sourire Sans Fin and Entraide Mercier.
Volunteering is the oxygen our country needs to thrive. We see how much volunteers do for all of us, and this is all the more true during this pandemic. I would like to thank each and every person who chooses to volunteer for this precious gift of their time. Merci à tous.
Thank you to all of you.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Barrie-Innisfil.
Like all communities across Canada, Barrie-Innisfil has not been immune to increased anxiety and increased mental health issues because of this crisis. The pandemic, resulting lockdowns, restrictions, and failures by government have taken an unimaginable toll on everyone's mental health, sparing no one and no age group. So it shouldn't surprise anyone that we've seen a marked increase in suicides in every community, including ours. As we approach Canadian Mental Health Week and Children's Mental Health Week, I encourage the Liberal government to move quickly and implement a national 988 crisis and suicide hotline. Let me remind the Prime Minister that a motion was passed unanimously by Parliament 129 days ago to implement the hotline. And I was glad that both Barrie City Council and Innisfil Town Council recently moved motions in support of a 988 hotline, and I thank them both for their endorsement. Finally, for everyone who is suffering, no matter where you live, no matter your age, and no matter the reason, please know that there are resources within your communities across Canada that you can access. Know that you're not alone, and there's always someone to talk to.
L'honorable député de...
The Honourable Member for Brassard-Saint-Lambert. Mr. Speaker, 95 years ago today, a princess was born in London whose destiny seemed rather uneventful, and yet she ended up making history.
Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, marks today 9.5 decades of a life so profoundly dedicated to service that few, if any of us, can ever begin to imagine or comprehend. But today Her Majesty is also living her greatest loss. Mourning for the Duke of Edinburgh, her closest companion for 78 of those 95 years, can only be a profoundly painful reminder that the solitude of her reign is now total.
I've always had strong monarchical convictions, but today I especially want to salute our extraordinary sovereign, Her Royal Highness, Queen of Canada. To salute her sense of duty, her undeniable dedication to the aspirations and harmony of the Commonwealth, and above all, her refusal to let adversity win out over hope.
With deep respect, Your Majesty, my heartfelt wishes for a day blessed with the affection of millions of people throughout the Commonwealth. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, climate change is real. Constituents in my riding and across Canada are committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions at home and abroad. Canadians know that an environmental plan that is realistic, proportional, and achievable is long overdue. Over 5 years, the Liberals have made grand pronouncements but failed to deliver concrete results. Canada has the highest environmental standards in the world, but we must do more. A Conservative plan with a carbon border tariff will deliver results. It will reward industries for their emission reduction innovations while incentivizing other nations to strive to meet Canadian standards. If other countries were to adopt Canadian practices, worldwide greenhouse gas emissions would be reduced by 25%. Real progress on climate change will come when Canadian companies can remain competitive and other countries move closer to Canada's world-class standards. Only the Conservative plan will secure our environment and our future.
The Honourable Member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is facing the worst health and economic crisis in a generation. While the government has announced record spending in their budget, what they didn't introduce is a responsible recovery plan. Many of my constituents are rightfully concerned that the debt introduced by this government will be felt for generations. Canadians deserve a government with a plan to secure jobs, accountability, mental health, our environment, our economy, and indeed, Mr. Speaker, our country. Now is the time to get back to work and secure the future for all Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, after 28 years of broken promises, this government announced plans to invest $30 billion into a national child care program. Today, I want to thank organizations like Child Care Now and the Child Care Coalition of Manitoba for their efforts in this long fight. But, Mr. Speaker, I am not holding my breath. It has been 28 years since the Liberal government promised a national child care program. Our party is ready to push this government to finally implement a child care system that must be universally accessible, affordable, and high quality. It must be publicly and sufficiently funded, publicly managed, and provide fair compensation that respects this critical and vital profession. And Mr. Speaker, this system must be tied to national standards, developed with those on the front lines with expertise in the field, including early childhood educators, child care staff, unions, and activists. As a former child care educator myself, I know that children, caregivers, and workers deserve nothing less.
The
Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Bloc Québécois, I want to inform the House that the National Assembly of Quebec has unanimously adopted the following motion. That the National Assembly note that the Canadian budget tabled yesterday represents an unacceptable encroachment onto its jurisdiction, that it reaffirm its full confidence in Quebec's child care network, and that it reject out of hand any conditions that might be imposed on Quebec during the upcoming negotiations on the full compensation that it will have to receive. That it reiterate its resolution of December 2nd, 2020, which denounced Ottawa's desire to impose Canadian standards on long-term care homes and seniors' residences and call for an increase in health transfers to 35% of the network's costs. That it deplore the absence of this last issue in the Canadian budget, that it reiterate Quebec's exclusive jurisdiction over mental health as well as its opposition to the establishment of Canadian standards in this area. Mr. Speaker, this was a unanimous message from Quebec, and this House must take note of it.
The Honourable Member for Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, today is the Queen's birthday. Her Majesty is 95. This birthday takes place at a sad time following the death of Prince Philip. Her reign began on February 6, 1952. At that time, Louis Saint Laurent was Prime Minister. Since then, she has worked with 12 Canadian Prime Ministers and has been Canada's Queen for almost half the time since Confederation. At 18, she joined the Armed Forces, training as a driver and mechanic during the Second World War. At 21, she said, "My whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service," a commitment she has more than fulfilled. La Reine Elizabeth II.
Queen Elizabeth II has supported Canada through some of our key moments of our history, and she imposed herself as a guardian of our traditions.
With me in wishing Her Majesty the Queen all health and strength on her birthday. Long live the Queen. God save the Queen.
The Honourable Member for Toronto Centre.
Mr. Speaker, he cried for his mother. He begged to breathe, a police officer's knee pressing on his neck, and minutes later he was gone, and everybody knew his name, George Floyd. There were marches across the globe. A sea of people took to the streets chanting Black Lives Matter, demanding justice. And for anyone who ever questioned systemic racism, George Floyd was an answer. But even still, with video captured from the cell phone of a brave 17-year-old girl who chose to stop and record what the world would see, I wasn't sure what would happen. Would there be a guilty verdict? Yes, on all three counts. I wept, not tears of joy, but of relief and resolve. This is not an ending, it's a beginning. There is no joy, there is no complete justice, there is only work. And Mr. Speaker, we have much more to do.
Oral questions. Question orale. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
58% capacity. That's what the Public Health Agency of Canada says the vaccine rollout is operating at because we don't have the supply to do more. It was operating at close to zero when the third wave started building in January and February. Why does this Prime Minister think that 58% is good enough for Canadians?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are working closely with the provinces and territories to support them in their responsibility of administering vaccines. We've sent more than 13.6 million vaccines to provinces and territories, with millions more arriving in the weeks and months to come. We know that in the month of May, there are at least 2 million Pfizer vaccines and more of others coming in every single week. And in the month of June, there will be tens of millions coming in. That's why it's important that the provinces be ready, as they are, for the ramp up as we move forward on getting everybody vaccinated.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
More will be coming when the countries that had a plan are finished vaccinating their population, Mr. Speaker. We're in a race against variants in this third wave, and we're losing because we didn't have the vaccines needed in January and in February. In fact, we still don't. But the Prime Minister is now not even restricting flights from COVID hotspots to stop the entry of new dangerous variants. The Prime Minister failed at the border last year. Why is he failing again?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, we've delivered more than 13.6 million doses of vaccines to provinces and territories. We actually passed by about 50% our targets of delivering 6 million vaccines by the end of March, and we will continue to deliver more and more vaccines to get Canadians through this. On the borders, we have some of the strongest measures in the world on the borders, but we will also continue to look at other ways based on science and data to keep Canadians safe. Importation from the border is a fraction of the cases we're coming in, but we will still make sure we are doing everything necessary to keep Canadians safe.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It's a sad day, Mr. Speaker, when a Canadian Prime Minister celebrates making his targets by stealing vaccines from the developing world. And no vaccines in January or in February means we're having a third wave in April. No border measures immediately means that the third wave could last until June. The Americans have introduced new border measures, Mr. Speaker, against Canada because of the lack of control of variants by this Prime Minister. Right. What is it going to take for Canadians to finally see action on COVID from this Prime Minister?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
First of all, Mr. Speaker, once again we see Conservatives peddling falsehoods when they say no vaccines in January or February. That's simply not true, Mr. Speaker. We have continued to deliver. We've continued to increase our vaccine supplies, and we actually went well beyond the predicted targets. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we see once again the Conservatives aren't asking any questions about the budget. Why? Because they must support it. They must think it is excellent because they recognize how targeted it is for Canadians, how it's going to get us through this COVID recession, how it's going to build back better. Thank the Conservatives for their support.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question about the budget. We're in the third wave and variants are out of control. That's a fact. Canadians are tired of this. The Prime Minister has promised to increase health transfers to the provinces, but only after the pandemic. He is sending water after the fire. Why is the Prime Minister neglecting the provinces again when they need help now? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. The Conservative leader only asks budget questions in French. There must be some reason for that, but let's move on. And then he keeps saying anything and everything. Billions of dollars have been transferred to the provinces to help them with their healthcare systems during the pandemic. And with this budget, we're sending another $4 billion to the provinces and territories. We are there for Canadians, despite the Conservatives who keep saying we're spending too much, we should spend less. We shouldn't be there for Canadians to the same extent, but we will always be there to support Canadians. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Besoin d'un leader.
The provinces need a leader, not a talker. Last year, the Prime Minister failed to shut down the borders because he didn't have a plan to slow down the virus. Yesterday, the U.S. took new steps at the border because of how slow this government has been in stopping the variants. We are fully into a third wave here, and the Prime Minister is always slow to slow things down in the hot zones. What's he waiting for? Why isn't he taking action? 5 questions today, Mr. Speaker, from the opposition leader, and in each question he made facts up. I understand that it's the responsibility of members of Parliament to debate here, but when he says things like the U.S. have just changed their position on Canada, that's quite simply false. Since November, Mr. Speaker, the United States has been expressing concerns with a number of countries, including Canada, and that's still the case. But the Conservatives are simply peddling falsehoods to play politics, and that's not the way things should be done. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking of things said in English versus French, the Prime Minister promised in English to increase long-term health transfers to the provinces, and that's good news. But we need that now. When you look at the budget, it's nowhere to be found. So my question is quite straightforward. Is the increase in health transfers going to happen now? And will it reach 35% of the costs? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc leader has obviously forgotten this, but in November we had a meeting with all the provincial premiers and territorial premiers, and I said clearly at that point that yes, we would be there to increase health transfers in the long term, but only once we're through this pandemic. And while we're in the pandemic, we will continue to be there with billions of dollars to support the provinces, $19 billion for recovery, $4 billion just now in the budget for health transfers, and all the help they need now. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, in the Prime Minister's mind, the pandemic is going to last another 5 years or more, I guess. The National Assembly of Quebec passed a unanimous resolution repeating its previous resolution, rejecting national standards for long-term care and calling for an increase in health transfers to 35% of the cost. And they're condemning the fact that there's nothing about this in the budget. So it's not just me, it's not just the Bloc, it's the Quebec Premier and the National Assembly unanimously. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, all Canadians and Quebecers are concerned about the fate of our seniors all across the country. They recognize that all seniors in the country need to be able to have a decent retirement, a safe, secure retirement. And that's precisely why we're working with the provinces and territories to ensure that our seniors have a safe, secure, protected retirement, whether it's in long-term care or elsewhere. We are respecting provincial jurisdiction, but we are moving forward to ensure that all seniors are protected. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
A doctor in Ontario wrote to the Prime Minister urging the Prime Minister to invoke the Emergencies Act and to step in and help. She writes that the situation is so bad in Ontario that not only COVID-19 patients, but any patient seeking health care is limited in the health care they can receive. She wrote again specifically, how angry would you be if your loved one had a heart attack and there was no hospital or ICU bed for them? Will the Prime Minister declare a public welfare emergency and immediately get the help that people need, getting vaccines to those who need it most?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, the federal government is there to help all Canadians. We have your backs. That's why we have indicated to the Government of Ontario that we are there to provide more sorts, whether it's Red Crosses, whether it's more vaccine doses, whether it's investments in health care and supports. We will continue to be there to support Canadians right across the country. I find it interesting, however, that the NDP is now calling on us to invoke the Emergencies Act when Tommy Douglas famously criticized my father for doing the same thing. We believe in working with the provinces and delivering concretely. That's what we're going to continue to do.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
The Prime Minister knows that it's a completely different act, and the Prime Minister knows that having someone's back means actually stepping in, helping, not standing back and watching. Radhika from the Greater Toronto Area lost her father to COVID-19. Her father worked for 26 years in the same factory in the Greater Toronto Area before getting COVID-19, getting sick, and then dying. She says that the way forward is to make sure people have paid sick leave. So will the Prime Minister, if he believes he can have people's backs, will he improve access to paid sick leave and protect workers?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the tragedies faced by far too many Canadian families over these past many months have been heartbreaking. And every step of the way, governments have been there to support people. We've been working hand in glove with provincial and territorial governments. We've been delivering direct supports to families. And we know, Mr. Speaker, there continues to be more to do. We move forward with paid sick leave to make sure that people didn't have to face the impossible choice between going to work or putting food on the table. And we will continue to work to do more. We know people need us to continue to have their backs, and we will.
L'honorable député de Louis.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, in January, February, Canada went through a vaccine drought, and the result is being felt today. Because of that drought, which is the Prime Minister's fault, the third wave is hitting much harder than it is elsewhere here in Canada. And the Prime Minister is telling people not to travel. But the Prime Minister recently said he was getting ready to go to Great Britain this summer. Mr. Speaker, why does the Prime Minister say one thing and do the opposite? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we can see the Conservatives are having to look pretty far afield to find attacks. I do hope to be able to attend the G7 Heads of Government meeting in person in June, But obviously, it will depend heavily on the situation we're in. That's precisely what I've said. We will be responsible. We will continue to work with our counterparts around the world to get through this crisis. It's a global crisis. And to get the economic recovery started, which is so important to everyone. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Yeah, if we want to look for examples, look abroad. CNN said recently that the government had recently failed Canadians who deserve better. That's the foreign opinion of the Prime Minister's management of the COVID-19 pandemic. And Boris Johnson had to correct the Prime Minister because the Prime Minister falsely asserted that they had a serious problem right now in Great Britain. This Prime Minister has not dealt with the vaccine problem properly in January and February. Can he at least admit that? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. When it comes to health care, we'll take no lessons from the Conservatives. They said that we wouldn't be in a position to deliver vaccines as early as we have. We do recognize that there is still work to be done. Nonetheless, 25% of Canadians have now been vaccinated. We've hit that mark, but we have to do better. And in the weeks to come, in May, we will receive over 2 million vaccines per week, and we will continue to increase the rhythm because we're working very hard on that every day. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, Canadians remember that in December 2020, the Prime Minister was proud to put on a display about vaccine orders, but in January and February there was a 10-day vaccine drought. No vaccines arrived, and now the third wave is hitting much harder in Canada than elsewhere because the Prime Minister created losing conditions in Canada, and that's making Canadians suffer. Can the Prime Minister admit that he has fallen down on the job, and he did so in January and February? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it's time to talk facts. We promised Canadians we would receive 6 million vaccine doses in the first 3 months, the first quarter of 2020, and we exceeded that by 50%. We got more than 9 million doses in the first quarter. Mr. Speaker, we are exceeding our projections, but we do acknowledge that there's much more work to be done, and we will continue working around the clock to deliver more and more vaccines to get us through this pandemic.
Donan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, 4,000 Manitoba essential workers will be fully vaccinated months earlier than the Prime Minister planned, thanks to the kindness and generosity of the North Dakota people. Manitoba truckers will receive both recommended doses, 2 doses within a short 6-week period, while transporting goods to the United States. Full credit to Manitoba's Premier for his visionary leadership on this. But will the Prime Minister admit it is in fact his vaccine shortages that caused the third wave of the pandemic and encouraged multiple premiers to go cap in hand to the Governor of North Dakota?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I think, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives would do well to pay a little more attention to science rather than grounding everything in their partisan attacks. But I'd like to remind the Honourable Member that we've worked every step of the way with the provinces and territories through this pandemic, including on procuring and supplying them with vaccines. Provinces are free to make their own decisions on who should be prioritized for vaccination. We're happy to see the province of Manitoba is making essential workers like truckers a priority. And as I've said many times, every Canadian who wants to will be fully vaccinated by September.
The Honourable Member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, what the Prime Minister would do well to remember is the third wave is raging in Canada, and Canadians are tired of waiting for vaccines. We're seeing dual citizens in Ontario crossing the U.S. border to get vaccinated. Many Canadians know snowbirds who have done the same. Everyone but the Prime Minister can see the U.S. and the U.K.'s success has allowed them to begin reopening, and yet Canada has resorted to taking vaccines from developing nations, an international embarrassment. Canadians deserve far better than this Prime Minister's mediocrity, and will he admit his failures to deliver enough vaccines in January and February led to the third wave of the pandemic in Canada?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, instead of talking down the hardworking Canadians across the country in provinces, territories, and in the federal government who've been working unbelievably hard to get people vaccinated, they should respect and reflect on the fact that Canada is now third third in the G20 in terms of people who've been vaccinated. In terms of the G7, we're also third, behind the US and the UK indeed, but ahead of many of our European counterparts. We will continue to do even better. We will continue to bring in even more vaccines because we know that vaccination and science is the way through this pandemic.
The honourable member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, this is serious. People are getting sicker and they're dying. Provinces are heading back into the third wave of the pandemic lockdowns. ICUs are overwhelmed. Field hospitals are being built in Ontario. A Vancouver nurse is asking for prayers because the situation is worse than she's ever seen. She's seeing people as young as 20 years old in her ICU, Mr. Speaker. And Canadians are frustrated, they are tired, and it's costing more Canadian lives and livelihoods. This is the COVID-19 legacy of this Prime Minister. Will he show humility for once and acknowledge that it is his failures to get vaccines to Canada adequately in January and February that led to the third wave of the pandemic and is costing Canadian lives?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on this we can agree. Canadians are tired of this COVID pandemic. People are frustrated about the restrictions that continue. We need to get through this as quickly and as best as possible, and that is why we are working day and night to bring in even more vaccine doses so we can end with this pandemic. In the meantime, we're going to need to continue to follow local public health guidelines, and we actually, as a federal government, brought in measures so that premiers across the country could make the tough decisions around closing down various sectors of the economy, knowing that the federal government was there to support workers, to support small businesses, to have Canadians' backs.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A judgment was finally delivered recognizing the viability and the legitimacy of the National Assembly. But it removed a part of Quebec from the National Assembly's jurisdiction. Quebec will obviously appeal that decision. Does the Prime Minister recognize Quebec's jurisdiction, and does he undertake not to finance those who oppose it? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, obviously we're aware of the decision. We will allow the court process to follow its course, and we continue to monitor the situation closely. The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, it's going to take a bit more than that, so let's do some reading. The National Assembly would like to remind everyone that the Quebec nation never signed on to the Constitution in 1982 when it was brought home by the... Excuse me, I'm just going to have to interrupt you for a second. Someone has their microphone on, and so I would ask everyone to put their mics on mute.
Put their mics on mute, et on va laisser...
And we'll allow the honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly to start over again. So for the sake of the Prime Minister, I'm going to do some reading here. The National Assembly points out that the Quebec nation never agreed to the repatriation of the Constitution in 1982 by the Government of Canada. The Quebec nation can establish its own rules with respect of its culture of institutions. All Quebecers are equal before the law, and all laws passed by the National Assembly apply throughout Quebec. Once again, that's a unanimous motion. 100% of MNAs in Quebec passed this motion. Will the Prime Minister respect Quebecers? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are obviously aware of the court decision. We will allow the legal process to follow its course, and we will monitor the situation closely.
Member for Calgary, Nose Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can't get over this because the Prime Minister is standing in question period today while millions of Ontarians are under lockdown again. The third wave is raging, and he's speculating about his own international travel. I guess international travel, it's not the time for that unless it's FOMO for the Prime Minister missing out on a cocktail party or some sort of photo op. The reality is that by the end of February, only 5% of Canadians had received even their first shot. That's unconscionable. Will the Prime Minister admit that if he had...
Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reality is Canadians have now been 25% of Canadians have received at least their first shot of the vaccines. And in the coming weeks, we're going to start getting more than 2 million vaccines every single week. And those numbers are going to keep going up. We know how important this is. On the issue of international travel, it is amazing to see the lengths to which the Conservative Party will go to make a tax. I highlighted that I was hoping to attend the G7 heads of governments meeting in June in Cornwall to work on the global recovery, but the Conservatives certainly can't have any of that.
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
You know what? There's a lot of Canadians who want to travel to go to funerals, to visit ailing loved ones. But they're not having any of that. And that's because the Prime Minister only delivered enough for 5% of Canadians to get their first dose of vaccine within the first 2 months of the year, that critical time when we could have stopped the first wave. He spent last summer covering up the WE scandal and shutting down Parliament instead of negotiating contracts that could have gotten us those vaccines. Will he admit that his failure to procure vaccines in January and February led to the third wave?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, again, we have now passed the threshold of having vaccinated 25% of Canadians, and we need to continue to do more, and that is something we're going to continue to do. In terms of the opportunities for the global community to come together, and particularly the leaders of the 7 largest economies, as I said, it is not certain, but I am hopeful to be able to sit with them in person, and I would do it wherever it was, whether it was in Cornwall, whether it was held in Oklahoma. I would be there to be there for the G7.
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
You know, the Prime Minister can mock his international travel against people who need to travel to see ailing loved ones who are separated with their families, but that's not going to cut it. He cites statistics, but one statistic is fact. Only 2% of Canadians, 2% have been fully vaccinated. That's abysmal. That's not going to stop the third wave. There's not enough supply. We're having to administer first shots of vaccines off-label for 4 months because he didn't produce enough vaccines. We could have stopped the first wave if he had gotten us vaccines in January and February, but he didn't. Why?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the Conservatives demonstrate that they'll never let the facts get in the way of a good political partisan attack. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, is we have been working diligently, and indeed experts and the National Advisory Council on Immunization made a recommendation that Canada follow a one-dose strategy with a larger stretch point between the 2 doses so that we could ensure more Canadians are protected. Those decisions are grounded in science, and even the Conservative health critic has to recognize that rather than make partisan attacks.
Honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
It's just ridiculous. It's off-label. No other country is separating doses by 4 months. Only Canada, because he didn't get us enough vaccines. Fact, only 2% of Canadians are fully vaccinated. Fact, only 5% were fully vaccinated by the end of January. That's his partisan fault. Enough with the partisan games. He didn't get us these vaccines. Now we're in the third wave. Now ICUs are overflowing, and it's because he didn't negotiate these contracts. Why didn't we have enough vaccines in January and February? For shame.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, again, I don't want to tell the health critic for the Conservative Party how to do her job, but if she actually looked around, the UK was actually the first country to expand that 4-month spread strategy, and as a way of getting more people protected as quickly as possible. So that is a strategy that Canadian scientists and experts have recommended, and that is what we are continuing to do. We have now passed the threshold of 25% of Canadians vaccinated. We have millions more vaccines coming in the coming months, coming weeks and months, and we look forward to getting through this pandemic by working together.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Sadly, Mr. Speaker, people are still faced with the impossible choice of going into work sick or staying at home and not getting pay because his Prime Minister refuses to fix the paid sick leave. The Ontario Science Table agrees Paid sick leave saves lives. Yet the Prime Minister continues to refuse to improve access to the paid sick leave. He's not listening to the scientists. He's not listening to workers. He's not listening to families who have lost loved ones. What will it take for the Prime Minister to improve access to paid sick leave and save workers?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the beginning of this pandemic, we have had Canadians' backs with unprecedented supports for workers, for families, for small businesses, for seniors, for young people, and we have continued to do that. In discussions with the provinces and territories at the end of last summer, we moved forward with 2 weeks of paid sick leave, knowing that it would make a big difference across the country, and we continue to work on that. We expanded it to 4 weeks. We also recognize that the provinces themselves have a role to play, and I hope a number of them will continue to step up on paid sick leave. There is a work for all of us to do, but 8 out of every $10 to support Canadians came from the federal government.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
The
Prime Minister has finally presented a budget with emblematic amounts. Well, congratulations, but the Prime Minister forgot an urgent request from provinces and territories. They asked for an increase in health transfers. We're in the midst of a crisis, a health crisis. Our health system has to be able to meet people's needs. Can the Prime Minister commit to increase health transfers, yes or no? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Yes, Mr. Speaker, I committed to do this last December when I had a conversation and a meeting with the premiers. But I also recognized that right now we have serious needs in our health system, and that's why we transferred billions of dollars additionally to the provinces and territories so that we could get through this pandemic. And once this crisis will be over, we will sit down and we'll determine how we'll be able to continue to increase health transfers in the long term. Yes, Mr. Speaker, that's what we're going to do.
Member for Cumberland, Colchester.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the global pandemic has been tough on all Canadians, but particularly on women, who tend to be the family caregivers, especially during a crisis. And research many women have had to exit the workforce, risking decades of women's hard-fought gains in the workplace. And we know this is often due to a lack of affordable, accessible, and quality early learning and childcare. So can the Prime Minister please tell us how much we are investing in a national childcare program, why it's so important for parents now, and how this will support women right across Canada? Thank you.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member from Cumberland Colchester for raising this important issue. Childcare shouldn't be a luxury. It should be something that everyone can afford. That's why Budget 2021 commits up to $30 billion over 5 years to build a Canada-wide childcare system. This plan aims to cut fees by 50% by the end of next year, and in 5 years, we aim to reach an average of $10 a day daycare right across the country. We look forward to working with all the provinces and territories to ensure that all Canadians have access to early learning and childcare.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
In the UK, restaurants are starting to reopen. In New Zealand, in Australia, they're accepting international travelers without a quarantine. In the US, large gatherings for sports and music events are starting to resume safely. But here in Canada, there's a major third wave. How come Canada is in such a negative position with respect to our other international allies? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that there are many Canadians who are going through very tough times right now during this third vague, but we also recognize that there are places in Canada that aren't facing a third wave, whether it's the Atlantic provinces or the work the federal government did with them that allowed them to have a different reality during this pandemic, or also in the north, we worked with the ministers of the territories so that this pandemic would be different for them. There are other areas that need more help, but the government will be there for Ontario and for other places that do need our assistance. The honourable member for Carleton.
Vaccines. Yeah. That was the one job he had at this point in the crisis. Now he tries to throw on a cape and says he's the hero that's going to solve the problem that he caused. Yeah. The reality is the rest of the world was being vaccinated in January and February. Vaccination rates in the US and UK are twice what they are here in Canada. The rest of the world is reopening while we're being confined to our basements because of the wave of the variants that this Prime Minister allowed. Why did the rest of the world have access to vaccines in January and February while we did not?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, it should come as no surprise that that particular member has a way of inventing facts. The reality is we did get vaccines in January and February, unlike what the member is saying. But yes, indeed, we need to continue to increase it. Although for January, February, March, we actually surpassed our target of 6 million vaccines by almost 9.5 million vaccines total. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to deliver vaccines to Canadians as quickly as possible. We are now third in the G20 in terms of number of citizens vaccinated with at least one dose. We will continue to accelerate our vaccination.
Honourable member for Carleton.
Inventing facts. This from the Prime Minister, who has been embarrassed again on the international stage for stating falsehoods. Let me quote The Independent of London. The Canadian Prime Minister has bizarrely claimed that the UK is facing a very serious third wave of COVID-19, despite cases in Britain currently being much lower than in Canada. So he spreads misinformation here at home and embarrasses us abroad, well, he should be apologizing for his colossal failure to deliver vaccines. Why weren't Canadians vaccinated in January and February like everyone else?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've answered that question, but it is fascinating to me that the former member, the former finance critic of the Conservative Party, the now critic for jobs and growth, has absolutely nothing to say about our federal budget. We just put forward an ambitious plan for jobs and growth that I'm quite aware that the Conservatives have taken issue with, but they are choosing to not use this opportunity for debate, for discussion in this House of Commons to ask it. And I know the member from Carleton never shies away from debate, but why isn't he asking any questions about our plan to grow the economy? Is it because it's that good?
The honourable member for Carleton.
Well, it's because I looked through it and there was no plan for jobs or for growth to debate. All he's done is lock down the businesses that provide the jobs and growth. He's locked them down through his failure and his failure alone to deliver the vaccines that are opening up economies around the world. The President of the United States said every single adult in America is now eligible for vaccines. Here in Canada, we haven't even had 30 vaccines per 100 people. That is the contrast. If he wants to know why we have 300,000 missing jobs and so many people seeing the end of their lives as a result of COVID-19, it's because of his failure. Why didn't we get vaccinated in January and February like everyone else?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I now understand why the member for Carleton is not asking questions about the budget. He hasn't actually read the budget. So let me inform him that in this budget, we're extending emergency supports to bridge Canadians and Canadian businesses through to recovery. We're extending employment insurance sickness benefits from 15 to 26 weeks. We're revitalizing Canada's tourism sector with $1 billion investment. We're funding to enhance initiatives like the Black Entrepreneurship Program and the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy. We're establishing a $15 minimum wage, enriching the Canada Workers Benefit, investing in our small businesses and the transformation and supports they're going to need for the future. Mr. Speaker, this is a jobs and growth budget, and we are all apparently very proud of it in this House.
The honourable member for Joliette. Mr. Speaker, one of the Prime Minister's key commitments in the budget is for universal childcare. He's taking his cue from Quebec, which became a global pioneer in this area when Pauline Marois of the Parti Québécois created our daycare centres in 1997. Since the Prime Minister himself is basing himself on Quebec, would it not be natural for him to not dictate to Quebec what to do with its share of the money it's owed? Students don't correct teachers. So can the Prime Minister confirm that Quebec will receive its fair share of its funding without conditions? Without strings? That's the question. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Quebecers have shown for quite some time the path to follow with respect to daycare centres and for early childhood learning. We know that it's not just the right thing to do, but it's also the intelligent thing to do for the economy, for fairness, and for opportunities and economic growth. That's exactly why we're going to bring forward what we all have learned from Quebec across the country. And I would like to reassure you that Budget 2021 will have an asymmetrical plan with Quebec to allow for other improvements to its system. The Honourable Member for Joliette. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we want to know is, will this agreement have strings or not? What Quebec wants is no conditions at all. We want a confirmation of this. Will there be conditions or not? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, for several years now, we've been investing tens of millions across the country to increase daycare systems across the country, and every time we were able to get along very well with Quebec to send funds there so that we can invest in families and children. And certainly, Mr. Speaker, the work we're going to do with Quebec together to meet the needs of families across the country, and with the investment we're going to send to Quebec so that Quebec can invest properly. Well, we're very happy to be able to agree with Quebec on this, and we're sure that will happen. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Transparency and humility. Since the beginning, the Prime Minister has said that he's made no mistakes in terms of the vaccine supply for Canadians. But unfortunately, he is responsible for the third wave that we're going through right now in Canada. 8 million cases a day on average. Quebecers are under a curfew that restricts their freedom of movement. They can't see their families. Today, the Prime Minister, if he had done his job properly last year, we wouldn't be here today. So why did he fail Canadians by not giving them the vaccines they needed in January and February? Mr. Speaker, once again, let's focus on the facts. In the first months of the year, we promised Canadians 6 million vaccines, and we delivered 9.5 million vaccines, Mr. Speaker, and we're delivering them. But we know we have to work hard every day to deliver even more vaccines across the country. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Since the beginning of the question period, the Prime Minister is talking about his targets with respect to vaccine supplies. Who established these targets? Him. Where are the contracts showing that these targets are based on something? We don't have the right to see them. And who doesn't believe him? Canadians. And not just Canadians. Restaurant owners, such as La Bourgade in my riding, who had to shutter their doors. Children who don't have a social life because they have to go to Zoom school. How come he didn't do his job in January and February? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, small and medium business owners across the country were able to benefit from unprecedented support that the federal government sent them. And yes, 8 out of every $10 across the country in assistance during this pandemic was directly given from the federal government. We are there for families, we're there for students, and we're also there for small business owners, and we're going to continue to do so even as we unroll vaccines. Inaudible. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, if we'd had the vaccines, we wouldn't have to be giving small businesses loans now. If we'd had the vaccines earlier, we wouldn't have a curfew in Quebec, and people would be able to see each other. Children would be able to go to school. If we had the vaccines like the U.S. did, people would have had 2 vaccines. And now the Prime Minister is proud. Well, there were 200 million Americans vaccinated in 100 days. How come he didn't deliver for Canadians in January and February instead of putting us in the third vague we're experiencing right now? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, since the beginning of this pandemic, we're working to help Canadians, to support small businesses, to support families, and to create a vaccination strategy for the highest number of Canadians as quickly as possible. And we're going to continue to increase the vaccine rollout speed every week in Canada, and we're going to have everyone vaccinated before the end of September fully, and there are many provinces that will be able to vaccinate Canadians with the first dose before the beginning of summer. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue our work, and we have to keep holding up during this third wave. The Honourable Member for Marc-Aurèle Fortin. Mr. Speaker, as seniors age, they face increased financial vulnerability, especially women. We know that seniors over 75 years of age are often unable to work. They have disabilities and they have greater health needs. With higher expenses and lower incomes, seniors over 75 need additional support. Can the Prime Minister explain what our government is doing to make life more affordable for aging Canadians? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I'd like to thank, Mr. Speaker, my colleague from Marc-Aurèle Fortin for his hard work on behalf of seniors. Seniors are more likely to have depleted savings, to have disabilities, and to be widows, while their healthcare needs are rising. In the budget 2021, we kept our promise by increasing old age security by 10% for Canadians aged 75 years and over. We will also support them in the short term with a one-time payment of $500 in August. Seniors built Canada, and they can rest assured that we will always be there for them.
For Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
When confronted with facts, this Prime Minister screams out that it's fake news, but he justifies Canada going off label on the vaccines with a 4-month dosing, saying that the Brits did the same, when in fact they used a 3-month dosing interval. So instead of spreading misinformation, can the Prime Minister stand up and admit that Canada is in its third wave of lockdowns because he failed to deliver enough vaccines for Canadians to get both doses in January and February?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, a year ago there was no COVID-19 vaccines. Now there are many. And Canada, because of our procurement strategy, was able to sign deals with 7 different potential vaccine makers, many of which are able now to deliver vaccines, including to Canada. We continue to increase the pace of vaccine doses arriving in Canada. Indeed, in about a week and a half, we will switch to more than 2 million doses of vaccines arriving every single week. We will have close to 50 million vaccine doses by the end of June here in Canada. Mr. Speaker, we are on track to get through this pandemic.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Well, it's a real shame that this Prime Minister says that with only 2.5% of Canadians fully vaccinated that we're on track. This third wave is his failure. Residents in my riding can look across the border and see Americans in New York State who can get vaccinated at 16 years of age at their will because they have availability of supply. This is the third wave of COVID, the third wave of lockdowns because this Prime Minister failed to get enough vaccines for Canadians. Instead of making deals with the Chinese-owned CanSino, why didn't this Prime Minister focus on doing what was best for Canadians and getting vaccines for January and February?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, it's important that in this House we base our debate in facts. And in January and February, we did deliver hundreds of thousands of vaccine doses to Canadians. And indeed, by the end of March, by the end of the first quarter, we had surpassed our provisions, our scheduled deliveries of 6 million vaccines by a total of 9.5 million vaccines. We recognize there is much more to do, but as of right now, Mr. Speaker, over 25% of Canadians have received at least one dose of the vaccine, and we are on our way to getting through this pandemic.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, I guess this Prime Minister hopes that Canadians will accept that he will under-promise and over-deliver up to 2.5% of Canadians being fully vaccinated. I can tell the Prime Minister through you, Speaker, that's not good enough. This Prime Minister shut down Parliament during a pandemic, had his members filibuster the Health Committee, Defence Committee, Ethics Committee, Procedure and House Affairs, instead of working together in a Team Canada approach to vaccinate Canadians. This third wave is a failure of this Prime Minister. 25% of Canadians getting their first dose is not enough to stop the third wave. Why did this Prime Minister let us down?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, throughout this pandemic, one of the things that has been strong and remarkable is the level of collaboration we've seen across political parties and indeed across orders of government. That's what Canadians have wanted to see, people working together, like the federal government has consistently been there to support the provinces and territories as we make it through the various waves and as we face far too many tragedies. That's why 8 out of every $10 of support for the families through this pandemic came from the federal government. We have continued to step up every step of the way, and we will continue to. We know we need to continue to work together. Nobody wants to see the partisan attacks that are being demonstrated now. They want to see us all working together, which we will.
The honourable member for Niagara Centre.
Mr. Speaker, we are in the midst of this third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. Canadians need support now, and they need reassurance that the economy will be strong and jobs will be created once we are through this pandemic. Could the Prime Minister update this House on how Budget 2021 will support all Canadians?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I'd like to thank the member from Niagara Centre for his important question. This budget is about finishing the fight against COVID-19, and it's about creating prosperity for Canadians. Budget 2021 is a historic investment to address the wounds of COVID-19, put people first, create jobs, set businesses on a track for growth, and ensure that Canada's future will be more equitable, greener, and more prosperous.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister in his budget is proposing to cut assistance to people this summer. How come? We're in the midst of a third COVID-19 wave and we're still under lockdown. We really want people not to lose their jobs. Why is the Liberal government and the Prime Minister proposing to cut assistance this summer from $500 to $300. Why? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, at every stage we were there for Canadians. We made a promise to be there as long as it would take with all the necessary assistance. And we are here and we're going to continue to be there to support families, companies, workers, and all Canadians. We all have great hope that when the summer comes, we'll be able to have fewer restrictions and more economic activity. And we know that employers will want to rehire people, and that's why we've invested in an incentive for employers to hire more people. And we're always going to look at things carefully to make sure we're there to help Canadians when they need us. And that is all the time we have today for the question period.
For today's question period. Tabling of documents. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Take myself off mute. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 36, bracket 8A, I have the honor to table in both official languages the government's responses to 17 petitions. These returns will be tabled in an electronic format.
Very good. Dépôt de projet de loi.
Introduction of government bills. Statements by ministers. Reports from interparliamentary delegations.
Point of order, the honourable member for Sudbury.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
S'il vous plaît, Laurent.
Sorry, just a moment. If the honourable member for Sudbury can wait just a moment.
J'avais l'impression